Hey, Jed.
Hey, Mark.
This is so cool.
Very cool.
Thank you for, making your way over here and joining me on this. I've been very much looking forward to this.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
Me
yeah.
too.
Um, you and I met, I want to say it feels like a year and a half ago,
That's about right.
right?
Yeah.
And you were working on your book at that moment in time. But I think you had your framework pretty much locked and loaded at that time. And the title of this whole podcast series, Founders Frameworks. And so I'm a
Love it.
huge framework lover, and I was blown away by your framework and at that time. And as I shared with you, to me, it was the best framework I'd ever seen for pulling together everything associated with creating an amazing brand. It was comprehensive and yet relatively simple for something as comprehensive as it is. And I personally believe that I've been a student of brand for decades. Think that I know a fair bit about that. And as an example, I've had one of my BHAGs to be one of the most trusted brands in the world since I started this company,
Love it.
right? So,
And you're well on your way.
well, we're working hard, right? It's a grind. It's not as easy as you think it should be. I just want to say, number one, thank you for creating this framework. Number two, guys, if you want to read a great book on building a brand, this is it. It's Building a Brand That Scales, by Jed Morley. And so I would love to, always fun to get into the origin story,
Yeah.
right? Your origin story, and how you came to build out this thing, um, and there's a center of your brand wheel, for lack of a better expression. And so, at some point in there, let's get to that, because I think you and I are both deep believers in that thing.
Love that.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Cool.
So this journey started when I thought that brands were logos. I fell in love with Nike running track in high school
Mm-hmm.
and cross country. And the reason I liked Nike was because they gave me the courage to overcome the fear of pain. When you round that second lap, the last turn of that 800 meters, which was my event,
Yeah.
and the lactic acid is firing on all cylinders, and you have a gut check. Am I going to override the pain, or am I going to succumb to it and do something less than my best? And I felt like Nike inspired me to override the temptation to ease up.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered where that came from. So I've been in pursuit of understanding that emotional connection that a
Yeah.
brand can have with its core audience for a long time. I studied design undergrad, thinking that if I could just design a cool logo,
Mm-hmm.
I would be creating a great brand. And I've since learned that a brand is the sum total of everything we associate and experience with a brand: a business, a person, a place, a thing. And I love helping founders clarify and articulate why they exist beyond making money and creating those kinds of connections with their customers and communities.
Yeah.
And that's what the book's about.
Yeah. And and at the center is purpose, right?
Purpose. That's right.
And so, I mean, there's so much to unpack on just what you said here, right? But it's interesting because as a founder, I would say that I probably um, have fought my own people over the importance of brand almost since day one. And I would say that, you know, that in and of itself is a really sort of deep rabbit hole to go into because, you know, sometimes as a founder, you intuitively understand that brand is everywhere, right? It's like brand and culture, they're both kind of almost air, that right? Um, and they have to be extraordinarily, in,
Interwoven.
interwoven,
Right.
in sync, intermixed,
Right.
whatever the right metaphor here is. But, you know, a lot of people, in my experience, right, even starting from day one saying we had to be one of the most trusted brands in the world, they not only didn't get it, but, like, you know, they think I was an asshole because I cared so much about, like, everything, because brand is everywhere, just like culture's everywhere.
And the expectations that come with that demanding standard
Yeah.
of being at that level.
Yeah, and it's like you're being the bad version of founder mode, you're micromanaging, right? Just let us do this, and then they put stuff into the world, and you just want to cringe,
Right.
right? And so my hack for the first 3, 4, 5 years was I don't even want to look at the website, right? I can't do it. I got to focus on building the product, right?
Right.
Someday I'll be able to do this, right? Someday I'll
Right.
be able to figure out how to explain to people all this stuff
Right.
matters,
Right.
right? But, but, I think that I talk a lot about how, a founder has to own creating a great culture that ultimately will persist after the founder's gone, right?
That's right.
And to create that great culture, you not just need core values, right? Those are important, but you need to figure out a lot of other things, and you need to do a lot of work. And so I actually have I should share this with you soon, right? But I have a book
I'd like to see it.
that I've written. It's not as good as it needs to be. People are giving me some grief that it could be so much better, but it's like, yeah, but does it really need to be so much better? But the big idea is called A Founder's Guide to Culture.
Okay.
And it walks you through, as you start a company, the stages of development and what you need to do in order to create a culture that ultimately persists, right? And over time, you not only need to have the core values, but you need to think about the operating environment that the company's sitting in, the implications for culture there, comfort with ambiguity, levels of intensity, right, that the organization operates at. Then you need to start to, create the rituals and the artifacts, right, and the guardrails that protect the culture. And so that, when you end up moving on, hopefully, many, many, many decades into it, because I believe great founders want to be with that company for a very long time. You want to build a company that you love being a part of,
Right.
working with people you love working with. Um, you will have put in place enough substance so that if someone comes along, because they inevitably will, if they start to like tear apart some of the things that are core to that culture,
And
right?
brand.
We'll get there, right?
Yeah.
If they start to come in and tear apart things that are core to that culture, whether it's
Yep.
your ICP, it's your compelling value proposition, right? It's why you exist, the purpose, right? That
Right.
we'll get into in brand, right? Because
Right.
it's
Right.
so overlapped, right?
Right.
That it's like a bad organ, right? The organization will eject them, right? No, that's off. That's not who we are culturally speaking,
That's
right?
right.
The same big ideas are around brand,
Yeah.
right?
You can't operationalize the brand promise without the culture. You can't live up to the promise. And ultimately, a brand is the promise you keep.
Yeah.
So if you make a promise, but you can't keep it because your culture doesn't live in alignment with it, you'll bounce checks.
Yeah, and just like in a culture, right, with brand, you know, if you don't codify a bunch of things like I did with culture with rituals and artifacts and guardrails and storytelling, I forgot to talk about that, right?
That's
And
important.
core values, right?
Right.
If you
Mhm.
don't codify these things, then, it's hard to pass the brand on because it's just implicit in the founder's head right, and
Right.
you're basically sort of playing Geppetto with your culture. It's the same thing with brand.
And I like that analogy. I think some cultures feel so rigid and programmatic and top down. It's like Pinocchio. You mentioned
Yeah.
the puppeteer.
Yeah.
And so when does the wooden boy become when does the culture become a living, breathing organism?
Yeah. And it's the same story for brand.
Same story for brand. Yeah. If you get people to behave in a way that's consistent with your values in the way that they go about fulfilling the promise, that's when you start to separate and pull away from people who pretend to have a brand and really they just have a logo.
So I have a theory that, as I said earlier, I alluded to it, if not said it directly, but we didn't drill down on it, that it's rare, really, really rare for there to be a great company that doesn't have at its core a founder. Now, people confuse when I say founder with what I mean by founder, right? So Ray Kroc is the founder of McDonald's. Now, he's actually not the real founder of McDonald's, right? Schultz was not the real founder of Starbucks, but they were the founders of those two
The
organizations.
defining leader.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
The leader who defined what it would become.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it the same for brand?
I think there are a lot of iterations that can come before the coalescence of the identity and purpose and clarity of the brand force that ultimately becomes the way the brand manifests.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of the elements that you talked about with those examples of a charismatic leader who cares,
Right.
and they are willing to sacrifice for their values because they mean that much to them.
Yeah.
And you see it in those companies that become iconic. The thing that's curious to me is we can recognize the principles at work in those case study examples that we all like to hold up and celebrate. But when it's our turn to build that brand and that brand culture that supports it, sometimes we either don't know what to do, we don't have the courage or the commitment
Mhm.
to live into the principles we've seen pay big dividends for other companies. And that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to make it easy for other people to see what they could do to increase the likelihood of building a great brand that can actually scale, that can grow with the company, that can become something bigger than them as the founder.
So when you're, because I think you've been successful enough, you probably don't work with people that you don't think they're actually gonna benefit because they're not gonna really do the work.
Right. And I've leveled up
Yeah.
in terms of the caliber of people and companies I want to work with because there's only so much time
Yeah.
and you want to make an impact.
Yeah.
So you're selective.
Yeah. So what are the characteristics when you're thinking about a client, right, that you focus on?
That's a great question. The characteristics we look for is a leader who dares to be great. Time and again, we've seen scenarios where there's a brand unlock, an insight that could transform the business. And so often we uncover insights that could take the business to a whole nother level, put it on a different trajectory, and have a much bigger outcome for everyone involved, customers, the founders, the investors. And there's something inside the leader that hesitates. It's kind of like the kid on the diving board at the pool
Mhm.
who's hesitant to jump in.
Mhm.
And everybody's waiting in queue on the ladder, like, are you going to jump or not?
Right.
Are you going to go for it or not?
Yeah.
What's the use of having a brand breakthrough if you're not going to take it to market, if you're not going to activate it?
Right.
So if you're not visionary, if you don't have a big idea, and if you don't have a big commitment to realizing it in a big way,
Yeah.
then it's a pass for us.
Yeah.
And you get to the point after you've seen enough of these conversations and opportunities to be able to sense and understand whether there is a big idea and whether there's a big commitment to bringing it to market in a way that makes a big impact. So we're looking to have a big impact. And so we partner with people that are equally committed and capable of affecting that in the world.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see what can happen in terms of growth within the person who's founding the company, but also the people who are helping them bring that vision to life. And it's really satisfying to be an accelerant of value. We help companies accelerate value, and we help leaders accelerate their growth and development.
Yeah.
By helping them recreate the original inception of the idea and clarify and articulate it in a way that can rally the support and buy-in and belief of the number of people that it takes to bring that big idea to market at scale.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important to think about what does the brand want to be when it grows up from the early days of the business,
Yeah.
so that you don't paint yourself into a corner
Yes.
and miss out on the opportunity to attract like-minded people that have the talent and the capacity to do something significant.
It's the same with culture,
Right.
right? Because you can, you know, if you end up with, you know, some material percentage, we can say whether it's 10 or 20%, right? 5% you probably get away with, right? But if you end up with 10 to 20% or more of people who are not good cultural fits because you didn't focus on it early on, right? Now all of a sudden, there's a lot of hard work that needs to be done. And there are a lot of people that you're impacting because, and I'll take it on myself in terms of, what the work we did and didn't do well. Because all of a sudden now you're like, gee, this isn't the culture that I was hoping to build. Where did I mess up? Now I've got to go undo it. And that's hard. And by definition, you're going to be letting some people go, and that's hard. They're not going to like you for it, so that's hard.
Right.
Because generally speaking, most people don't want to be disliked. Generally speaking, right? So so both of whether it's brand or culture, once again, the overlap is extraordinary here, right? The better you are, the earlier on, you of course are not only have the focus, but then you have the benefit of compounding,
Right.
right?
Compounding
Is huge.
is huge, and the sooner you rectify and remedy the mistakes, the missteps, the sooner you can realize the compounding effect
Yeah.
of having some continuity and having that cohesive sense of connection over time.
So I'm going to ask the question again because not because you didn't answer it, you answered it, but I want to go for a very, very specific answer. What percentage of the time are you working with founders versus someone who's taken a company that where they're no longer the founder, and walk me through those? I mean, the founder discussion's probably pretty straightforward. I think the other one would be really fascinating. So what percentage is founder versus, that successor, whether it's his first
Right.
successor or second successor or third successor? What percentage of your clients fall into those two categories, and how do you sort of navigate?
I would say 8 out of 10 times working with
Yeah.
founder-led companies.
Yeah.
And the difference between the two is interesting in the sense that sometimes founders have more passion and emotional connection to the inception of the company, and that can be good and bad. Sometimes they need to pivot and they're reluctant to
Mm-hmm.
change or admit that maybe their initial hypothesis didn't work the way they wanted. Other times I see clients and CEOs that are pushed in different directions because of the funding that they've taken.
Mm-hmm.
So there are structural reasons why they're headed in a direction that may not feel is right.
Right.
And that dissonance, that disconnect can be really damaging.
Yeah.
Because psychologically, you're at odds with yourself.
Yeah.
And you can feel that there's an underlying conflict.
Yeah.
The word that keeps coming up for me as I listen to you describe the different kinds of founders and the dynamics at work between brand and culture is alignment.
Yeah.
If you don't have alignment, you're constantly running against the wind. And the delay, the distraction, the deferred gratification of the success you might have had if it had been reversed, you had that tailwind when there is alignment, is significant. I
Yeah.
can't overemphasize the importance of being clear and then attracting like-minded people so that you can have the benefits of alignment to accelerate your success and to sustain it over time.
Yeah.
And I think that includes the kind of funding that you choose
Mm-hmm.
and who you get it from and who you partner with.
Yeah.
So that they too are aligned.
Right.
And when you get that momentum going, watch out, because that's when you see the exponential growth
Yeah.
that comes from having a sustained focus.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you have a decent culture and a decent brand, right, and the founder, let's just say, sells the company, let's just say they sell it to a private equity firm, and the private equity firm brings on a new CEO, new leadership team, whatever, and then they start to rip away some of the core, whether it's cultural or brand specifically. Then you have a bunch of people who help create this great company, right? Because obviously it's good enough to be purchased by a private equity firm.
Right.
And so now you start to have those people leave, right? And because they don't like where things are going. So, and maybe there should have been change. Let's just say that you really didn't need to have change, but but regardless, they're ripping away stuff. And if there never should have been change, what's probably going to happen is they're going to have problems. They're going to go, shit, right? Maybe they go and hire another CEO that understands who the company was at its core, both culture/brand, and they repair all the damage, right? And then they get back on trajectory,
Right.
right? Or, right, maybe they figure out a different culture, and maybe they figure out a different brand, story, essence. I find that I would bet that version where they made it better, different and better, is a rare is a rare outcome.
It is a rare outcome, and you said a key word I wanted to circle back and highlight, and that is core. Core people, core aspects of the brand and the culture. Who clarifies, who codifies what's core,
Yeah.
and who advocates and protects what's core.
Yeah.
You see examples like Schultz and Iger, by Bob Iger coming back and leading their respective companies, Starbucks and Disney. Why? Because they understood what the brand was about better than the people who succeeded them. And how do you know what's core? And how do you internalize that and make sure that you've transmitted it to the next person who's going to sit in that seat to build on what has made you unique in a way that adapts to changing forces?
Well, and it's interesting, Starbucks is back in the news again, right? From a cultural perspective, right? And, they made some decisions, probably at least a decade ago that ended up not thinking were great, and then they ended up, reversing them, but people that came in after those decisions now don't like what who Starbucks is and part of Starbucks culture. And so, so now we are here, Starbucks now has had, another turn where it's got cultural issues. Um, and so it's interesting when you look at, and then, Schultz I think he's been back twice since
Right.
he retired.
Right.
So, some of these decisions, man, they can hurt you for a long time. Um, Disney, I think you and I've jammed on this one, right? So once again, going back to, I've been studying brand really intently since Built to Last came out, right? So we're talking 1989, maybe,
Yep.
ish, right? 1989, 1990 for sure. So I've been really, like studying brand, and, when Disney bought ABC, I was like, right? Because Disney was, its brand, right? Its culture, its ethos, right? It was all about making families happy,
Right.
right? ABC, right, is not about making people happy, right? The reality is, what if it breeds, it bleeds, it leads, kind of a thing, right? So to me, those two cultures, I thought, wow, right? I don't, ESPN, yeah, I can buy that one, right? But it was ABC that I thought, well, this one's really gonna sort of cause some problems for,
And who's leading?
yeah,
Right.
right,
Whose culture is going to influence who?
yeah, right, because otherwise now, you have these cultural disconnects,
Right.
right? So, and so what you see is in Disney, right, over the years, it's had these ups and
Ups and
downs
downs.
because it's navigating this weird set of cultures,
That's
right?
right. Yeah. And so you get that underlying current. And is it a riptide? Is it pushing you toward where you want to go or taking you off course? One of the companies I've admired that we had a chance to work with a few years ago is Lucid Software.
Mhm.
And Dave Groh's now the CEO, Carl's son before him. Carl personally interviewed everybody who was hired.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget when I was consulting with Lucid, I was in their break room. They said, "Hey, Jed, if you're here and you want, you can have lunch, and we have this well-stocked kitchen." And inevitably, when I was in the kitchen, a stranger for all intents and purposes, who is that guy? People would introduce themselves,
Mhm.
employees of Lucid. And I thought, what's going on here?
Right.
Why is everyone consistently interested in me? And it was genuine and it was warm.
Yeah.
They were extending themselves, they were wanting to connect, and it was completely prompted by anyone. No one was suggesting, "Hey, you should go invite Jed to have lunch with you," or whatever. It was just organic,
Yeah.
but it was cultural.
Yeah.
And it's because they were so careful about curating a culture and making sure that the people they hired
Yeah.
were aligned.
Yeah. So they thought you were potentially interviewing for a job?
They just saw me and wanted me to make me feel welcome.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was it. There was
Yeah.
no ulterior motive, you know?
Yeah.
It was just that's how we are, that's who we are.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
And they did that at scale.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, they've built a big business
Yeah.
because they were able to keep and cultivate that core over time,
Yeah.
and they're getting the compounding effects
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
But think about of all the things a CEO could do when you're already a 100 million plus ARR company.
Yeah.
Carl's son's taking time to interview each new hire
Yeah.
because he realizes that culture is that consequential
Yeah.
to the success and the sustained success of the business and the brand.
Yeah. I interviewed every single employee up to 100. And then I got feedback that I can't continue to do this,
Interesting.
right? And I gave in. And you can tell where I am right now, right? So, you know, one of the other things I used to do, that I think was probably one of the best things I did was, in the last big company I ran, we had 200 and some odd employees, and we had a bonus program, annual bonus program. And I oversaw that, of course. I was a resident, right? And I oversaw that program for several years. And then I said, enough of this madness, because it was just way too much negotiation. It was just messy, right? So I decided that I'm going to allocate the bonuses to every person all the way down based upon everything I know. Then I had their managers, right, the team leaders, and I would all get together and we would tweak common language, right, common perspective, set the whole thing up. I took that from a 3-week process to a 2-hour process,
Wow.
right? Because I started with a common perspective, right? And then what was really fascinating was when, let's just say of the 200-ish, maybe there were 10 or 15 names that would be negotiated, for lack of a better term. Those negotiations were extraordinarily insightful, right?
Negotiations with your team.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Why
Your
is so and
leadership.
so getting this and so
Right.
and so's getting that, right?
Right.
So then we'd have that conversation,
Right.
right? And it would help align the leaders not only on the way they looked at their people, right, but literally on how we all saw those people, right? So sometimes it was, you have one leader who thinks, well, they're great, right? Nothing wrong with you. But another leader that says, no, they don't work well at all with a bunch of different people, right? So you got that thing going on. And then you have, another one who's just like, they think, everybody should make, 120% of their making or an 80%, and then you align on that. So it's really interesting just to do that, because after a couple of years, it was like, I took that process down to, it was lickety split, because there was a common system in there. There was a common way of approaching
A
it.
shared understanding.
Shared understanding, right? So.
And setting the culture and leading from a position of shared understanding
Yeah.
makes all the difference.
Yeah. Because ultimately, I think, I was trying to remember who it was. I want to say it was like Sergey Brin or someone. I think they got up to like the first 350 employees that went into Google. He interviewed every single one. And it could have even been, it was a big number, right? So I was like, hey, I'm only at 100.
Right.
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 But yeah, that I think the, there's that early work, I think is so important for both brand and culture.
Absolutely. You mentioned purpose.
Yeah.
When I worked with Ben Peterson and Ryan Sanders, the founders of Bamboo HR, they were 5 years into it. and they had recently rebranded. They changed the name of their company to Bamboo HR. They had a new logo. They needed a new story and strategy to go with it, and I was their marketing leader at the time, and so we worked together to be able to help them uncover the underlying core value that caused them to create the company in the first place. And we were able to articulate together their brand purpose, which they've continued to use ever since. It's been their guiding North Star. We set people free to do great work.
Right.
Now, Bradley Rencher runs the company, but the purpose didn't change. He continues to build and be the steward of that ideal. And the thing that I was impressed with from Ben and Ryan was their commitment to living the brand inside the company.
Yeah.
So they made sure that their people didn't work overtime. They didn't work evenings or weekends because they didn't want people burned out,
Right.
which was counterculture because most startups talk about the grind
Yeah.
and the expectation is you're going to do quote unquote whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So Bamboo HR did a different tack. They zagged when everybody was zigging and said, we're going to insist that you take vacation. We're going to give you money to spend on vacation. You better spend it all.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, they have people that have been with them for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And think about the benefit of retaining top talent.
Yeah.
They have the institutional knowledge. They know the space. They know the company. They have deep customer relationships. And I think that's what propelled them to such successful benchmarks. They've exceeded everyone's expectations, I think, for a company that could break the mold when it came to the quality of life, work-life balance.
Right.
And it's because they were really committed to creating a place that sets people free to do great work inside the company as well as for their customers.
Right. And getting that balance so it's not abused is actually easier said than done.
Right.
Right. Because that's been our goal. Right. Is to have a similar, we call it work-life harmony. But what was fascinating, it has been fascinating is, we have had people that have abused us on this, right? And part of you is like, this is much harder than like my old business, one of my old businesses. It was actually a heck of a lot easier to create the culture because it was up or out.
Okay.
Right.
And tell me about that business.
So investing and lending to companies being acquired by private equity firms.
Okay.
Right. Or recapitalizing them as well. Right. So, and we had hundreds of people, and we had teams. We had teams against markets. We had teams against industry. Right. We had teams that would focus on syndications. And so we had like this constellation of teams is the way I would present the business model.
Okay.
But every single team, right? You had sort of a entry level, and then you had someone who would focus on one of the core things you do. So the core things you do is due diligence. A core thing you do is marketing. A core thing you do is customer service, right? So you have these core characteristics on each core functions on each team, and you can decide how you want to organize people. Do you want them to all be all three? Do you want to have just salespeople, just due diligence people, and just customer success? But within 2 to 3 years, you need to move up to that next level of development from a skills and competencies perspective, right? And then we had to believe that you had what it took to make it to basically the essence of a partner. And at a partner level, you got carry in all of our deals. And so there was I want to say 3, maybe 4 levels between entry level and partner. If you include interns, for sure, there was 4 levels. But if you were not progressing and we didn't think you had what it took to become a partner, which means you were pretty good at all 3 of those things, right? Then we said, hey, we don't think you're going to make it to partner level.
Right.
So we just want to let you know this, right? You should go look for a job, right? We're not going to fire you, right? But you got like 3 months to go find something else, all right? And so, it was pretty straightforward, right? You needed to, from a performance perspective, you needed to perform. Culture perspective, you needed to be a great cultural fit. Right. So I call it, that system gave us a really good balance of what I call high care and high performance. And you obviously joined that organization because that was the deal. Right. and
And everybody knew going
everybody knew
into
going
it,
into it. That's the deal, right?
this is the deal,
So it was actually relatively straightforward because you either had what it took or you didn't,
or you didn't.
right? And I remember I'm literally the guy. I took over and I changed the culture there, right? I implanted the upper out model. I won't bore you with the whole story, but everybody was afraid of the change. When we announced it, it was like Christmas Day because all the employees understood what the deal was.
Now they knew.
Yeah. And the reality is that everybody in the company thought I can succeed in that culture. So we had still had a good culture, right? It wasn't like,
It
oh,
wasn't
it wasn't like, oh
choosing,
shit,
it
right?
wasn't either
This isn't
or.
what I joined, right?
Right,
It's like, no, this is cool, right?
right.
Now I know what it is, right? Now I know how to play the game. And then when we even rolled out a whole career path model to help people, okay, so these are the skills you need to develop, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it worked out really, really well. But my point is that was actually an easier culture to build than what I'll call balanced ambition, which is what the Bamboo guys had, and what we have here, right? Which is, look, guys, it's got to be high care and high performance, right? Yes, we want to not have, we want you to have what we call work-life harmony. Yeah, yep. But guys, it's not a place where you can take 400 hours off,
No,
right? And it's not a place where you can't perform. It's
right,
not a place where, you can hide and think that no one's going to notice it, right? Everybody has to contribute. Everybody has, and so, on a cultural perspective, we were actually, very, 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 very few bad culture hires in our entire history, right? On the performance stuff, we did have some people who drifted, I'll call it, into sort of comfort and convenience more than high performance,
high
high care.
performance, right.
So it's been harder, to be honest.
Finding that balance.
Yeah, finding the
Yeah.
balance.
And I think if your culture is that you're not allowed or expected to work after hours, you'd better make the hours you are at work really count.
Yeah,
So there's an added incentive to be effective.
yeah. And so don't screw it up for all of us,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
other thing in writing the book that came into focus for me was the importance of understanding your customers,
Mhm.
really deeply caring about and connecting with who exactly it is that you're serving.
Yeah,
We've had a lot of opportunities to help clients understand and clarify who are their ideal customers.
yeah,
And it takes time to get to the kernel sometimes because they have so many kinds of customers that they haven't really taken time to
yeah.
assess and decide who is our core customer.
Yeah, and you know how that happens, right? It's because in the beginning, right, you're like, anything that breathes or fogs a mirror, right, we'll take them.
We'll take them.
Right? But very swiftly on, right? If when you have non-ideal customers, right, they're demanding things that you should not be doing, right? Worst case, they become big and all of a sudden now you're being pulled in a direction that you never wanted to be pulled in, but you're not solid enough, right? You haven't created a strong enough company yet where you can just say, hey, right, we're going to fire them,
Right.
right? And actually, I don't know if you know Bob Glazier.
I know.
He's got his most recent book's called Compass Within. But Bob ran a marketing company, very successful. Wrote a book called Elevate, and he literally was telling me in our time together about how the time he had to fire like his most important client, his biggest client,
His biggest client.
right, because they were not a good cultural fit,
Right.
right, and it was super scary,
It
right?
is scary.
Yeah. So once again, getting this stuff right, and back to compounding, right? When you can
Right.
get a really clear ideal customer,
Right.
right? And I mean, right, really good
Really
definition of
good.
of demographics and psychographics and geographics,
Right.
right? That's at least the way I talk about it,
Sure.
right? And now, right, if someone's not ideal, because they show up, right? You know, I hate to say it, but don't listen to them,
Yeah.
right? Right. And certainly don't let them influence your product. Don't let them abuse your employees,
Employees.
right?
Right.
And then of course, obviously, now you get to compound, right? And it's interesting because there's been moments in our company's history uh, where I had a fractional CMO, and he and I disagreed on who our ICP was.
Oh.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. Now, I should have fired him the first week.
I was gonna say, how did that resolve?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
But he's really smart, right? But there were like 3 or 4 areas where we just disagreed with each other, right? And because he was smart, others are, sitting around the table going,
Persuaded.
"This guy's smart, Mark. Why don't you listen to him, right? Who made you king?" Well, it's my company.
It's my company.
But let's forget about that one. I don't want to play that card, right? But occasionally, unfortunately, I probably did. But, you know, our ICP from day one was always, for me, the leader of the company, right? And we had debates internally around whether you even make that more specific, right? Whether it's a founder, is it a business owner, is it an entrepreneur? Because they're different people.
And
Right.
is this in context of 90?
This is 90.
This is 90,
right?
yeah.
Right. What he wanted to do was listen to the employees
Of the client
of the
company.
client.
Of the
Right.
client.
That's
Yeah.
who he wanted to index into. And I'm like, no, because most of them don't even understand or agree with what's taking place right now in their company. Right. And so I'm like, no, I would go so far as to say that, guys, I don't want you to listen. Right. Because we had chat, we get all this feedback on chat, as you can imagine. Right. I'm like, look, for all practical purposes, for right now and until we agree otherwise, right? All that feedback that's coming to you from the lower levels of the organization, right? Ignore it. All that feedback that's coming to you from the founder, business owner, right, et cetera, that's super important. Feedback at the senior leadership team level, that's really important as well, right? But my number one ICP is the founder slash CEO slash business owner. And to the extent that the feedback that you get from the senior leadership team is in alignment with that, awesome, right? But let's not have feedback at the next level, or worse, the next level down, that actually does not align with the CEO slash owner, right? Slash founder. That,
That was the conflict.
yeah. And trust me, that was not like easy to resolve internally.
How did you work through it?
To this day, I still don't think we've done a good enough job. To this day.
Yeah. Something that we've found to be really helpful
Yeah.
is having the opportunity to step out of the day-to-day and have in-depth conversations with customers about what's working or not and why.
Yeah.
And having an empathetic approach to that, to where you're not thinking of it as what's in it for us, but what can we do to better serve the customer, and to have context for their pain and understanding where it's coming from and what more you can do to
Yeah.
better serve and support them. The thing that surprises me is how few companies take time to talk to their customers.
Um, I've had this conversation with my senior leadership team. I think we do not at the senior leadership team level talk to our customers enough, right? Our product people do, our heads of
Right.
products do,
Right,
right?
right,
Our
right.
head of product marketing does,
Right.
right? I would argue probably not enough, right? I do, right? Because I have clients and I'm out in the marketplace all the time, and I'm coming into people
Interacting.
90. Oh yeah, right. I love that. Blah blah.
Yeah.
So I have those conversations. But I agree with you. Number one, number two, the nuance, because I can hear some of my own employees right now talking about this issue. As I said, it's alignment, right? So it doesn't mean that you don't listen to the department leaders. That's not what I said, right? And it doesn't mean that we don't listen to the next level down, because they do matter, right? But but it's just a question of how you weight things. And now, if all of a sudden you know that, like, the 2 levels below the CEO founder, there's a disconnect with your product, right? Now the question is, okay, do you support, right? How do you reconcile that, right? Because we have had an issue of, I call it whole company product market fit. We always, we have 17,000 leadership teams that are out running on 90, but then only like 20% of our companies go all the way down. So I've
Meaning they
everybody
have
in the
everyone
company,
on it.
yeah, which
Yeah.
is what we built it for, right?
It's for everyone to be on.
Yeah. Now, why is there this this problem? My perspective is twofold. Number one, we haven't armed the founder and the senior leadership team well enough to believe in the power of cascading it down. That's a thing. Number two, we are behind, but we're catching up swiftly in terms of integrations. And so what'll happen is, no one wants to have two systems of record for goals or to-dos or
Sure.
project management, right?
Right.
So the reality is that you need to integrate with these project management platforms. And I call it tech stack anarchy because what you see in most of our companies, one group will be using Monday, another group will be using ClickUp, another group will be using,
Asana.
Jira, another group Asana, right?
Right, right.
And it's like, guys, do you do work together? And if you
Yeah.
do work together, right? How do you decide whose system you're going to be using?
Right.
Whose project management system do you use? So I believe there's this tech stack anarchy issue that it's out there. So,
And that the frontline workers are in those tools and platforms
yes, yes.
every day.
Yeah, exactly. And you really have like the project leads,
Yeah.
right? Which is it's usually one step below like the department lead
Uh-huh.
usually.
Uh-huh.
But at times you'll have departments involved in those as well. So there's this weird area within the company, like it's hard to go through because of this issue. Now integrations hopefully will impact that, and then ultimately, right? We just got to make the product
I think
more
that's a really good
compelling.
insight. We've actually bumped up against that
Yeah,
at Backstories. How do you integrate tools like 90 with, we use ClickUp,
yeah,
so that there's that integrated,
yeah.
seamless reporting up and down.
Yeah, because, the people down below, you're right, as a leader, you want to have a great relationship with your team. If your team's bitching at you all the time because, well, I got to do this double entry
Double
crap,
entry
right?
crap, yeah.
Then, I get it, right? And so, so I do get it. And that's why integrations are so important. And we have integrations coming out for Monday and ClickUp and Asana and to-do list. And then, on and on. But, going back to the ICP, you got to choose like a really clear ICP,
You do.
right? The ICP can't be a company.
It's not, well, and this is the distinction that I addressed in the book in that section we were talking about leading up to this conversation. Messaging is designed to operate at a company level. We call that brand messaging. You
Yeah.
can call it company messaging if you
Yeah.
want. It spans every audience and offering. And then you have audience specific messaging. So in like fashion, you have ICP level communication where you're talking to a type of company. And then there are individuals within those customer companies
Yeah.
who are making or influencing the buying decisions. So we make that distinction. We say ICPs are for companies. Ideal customer profiles, might as well say ideal company profile.
Yeah.
And then customer personas are the people who make or influence the buying decision within those companies. And that's helped us keep that clear and straight.
Yeah. And then obviously with the advancement of technology, you can, because I've always said, look, guys, once we get to the ability to communicate on a one-to-one basis, all these issues go away.
Yeah.
Right. Because we do know, and that's, remember when we were talking about with Cole before we got on here, right? Just getting down to the archetype, getting down to the, the person in that seat, understanding the person in the seat, understand the nature of the seat, right? Understand where they are in the organization, et cetera. We have the ability to ultimately do that. But, in the beginning, right, without sort of having evolved tech stack in this regard,
Right.
marketing tech stack. And I would say that, we know this, but we're not, nowhere near great at this yet because it's complicated.
It does take time
Yeah.
to parse it out.
Yeah.
And what do you do with the information once you get it? How do you store it in a single source of truth that everybody can tap into and leverage in their respective areas of
Well, in
responsibility?
theory, right, we run on a HubSpot. So in theory,
Yeah.
right, when we
Yeah.
send out emails, HubSpot knows, right, that this is the way we
Right.
craft this for this particular person. I mean, it should be able to get there. We should be able to get there,
Yeah.
but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a process.
Yeah.
I don't think branding's ever done.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like the Golden Gate Bridge. They stop, they paint it, and then they paint it again.
Well, it's, entropy's everywhere,
Right.
right? And it's going to, it hits everything, right? It hits your KPIs, it hits your vision, it hits your ICP, it hits your processes, right? It hits your design, it hits your website. I mean, it's everywhere, right? So yeah, there's no such thing as ever done.
Having clarity around who you are, what you do, and why it matters. If you get that brand purpose, the difference you make beyond making money,
Yeah.
you clarify that and continually teach and reinforce it with the culture, the artifacts, the routines, the stories. It helps people course correct. You are going to get blown off course. And if you know where the true north is, you can adjust and come back in alignment with that over
Yeah.
and over again.
Yeah.
And over time, get that compounding effect.
Yeah. So, how should people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about backstory and how you can help?
Glad you asked. I'm on LinkedIn and we're at backstorybranding.com.
All right. Well, once again, I love the work you're doing. I appreciate you putting this into the world, and I suspect we'll talk again.
Thanks, Mark. This was great.
Same, Jed. Thank you.
Thank you.